That's why he asked them, you don't have any faith. Where's your faith? See, if we believe in St. Matthew 19:26, St. Matthew 19:26 says, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. If we truly believe that with God all things are possible, then why would a child of God accept defeat because every outcome that man discusses is believed to be the only way? There's a commercial that I've seen recently on television in recent months about a cancer treatment center, and how that these people who are on these commercials, they talk about the fact that when they went to one doctor, how that one group of doctors seemed to give them the common story. They have so many days to live, and they might as well prepare. Well, these people didn't necessarily like that diagnosis, so they took it upon themselves to go to this other place. And this other place gave them a different assurance, an assurance that at least caused them to want to fight and try and believe. The point that I'm trying to make is that that's what man says. And that's what God's people tend to believe. That's what their faith tends to rest in. Well, if they said it, it must be true. That's not true as we either. Just because they say it doesn't mean that it's true. That's why a child of God should not accept defeat, because every outcome that has happened in man's eyes beforehand has ended up in defeat. Now, in that scripture, Jesus was not just speaking about the fact that they were fearful of the actual storm. He was speaking about the fact that they were doubting God and believing that God didn't have control over the situation. But the Bible clearly stated that Jesus immediately brought control to that situation. In 1 Corinthians 3, drop down and read for me starting at the 13th verse, please.
Every man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it, because it shall be revealed by fire, and the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. Continue.
That's good. The Bible said every man's work shall be made manifest. It's going to be known. The word goes on to tell us it's going to be revealed. But look at how it's going to be revealed. Look how every man's work is going to be revealed. By what?
Fire.
Fire. What happens with fire? You get too close to it. What happens?
It will burn.
You get burned, don't you? So, an unplanned wildfire popping up. What it's saying is that during these kind of times, it reveals what kind of person you are. It reveals how much you believe in God. It reveals whether or not you are playing church or whether or not you are serious about church. It's during these times it shows who you're with. The Bible is speaking about every man's work, everything that a person does. In other words, everything that we do for service throughout the week, each week during the month, throughout the year. If a challenge comes up, if a problem comes up, if a trial comes up in your life, if a tribulation comes up in your life, the Bible is declaring unto us your maturity, your spiritual acceptance of what you've been taught is being tried by fire. Not by me, but by God. Because the same thing applies to each and every one of us, all of God's children. But what it's trying to help us see is that problems, trials, and tribulations, they come along because your faith, as Jesus just put it, is being tried. The Bible said here it's going to be revealed by fire. is going to be revealed by some unplanned situation that's not going to be too comfortable. And that unplanned situation is going to try everybody of what kind of work it has been. So during those times, God's people can either crumble and fall apart and accept the current wisdom of the time, or they're going to take the time and come back and do the will of God. They're going to stand up. But fires, storms will try the foundation that you've built up in your life. That's what it will do. You remember I was talking about the Sunday saint. Well, a trial or tribulation, a problem that comes into the life of a Sunday saint, if they were not serious, that's the foundation that they built up in their life, being there on Sunday. They're not really doing anything with trying to grow with the Lord during the course of the week. When a fire or storm comes into their life, it's going to try that foundation that they built. They've only built that brick. I'm only going to be there on Sunday. That's the foundation that they built upon. They put that brick into their life to build their temple and their house. And that's all that they've built. So if this trial or tribulation comes into their life, they don't have much there built. And what's going to happen, that trial or tribulation is going to cause them to either have faith in that brick that they've built, or it's going to cause them to have faith in what everybody else has faith in the community. How everybody else typically addresses that challenge or that problem in the community. This is what the Bible means by trying by fire. Trying to see if the series of habits, the conduct and behaviors that you've built up over time, you're really sincere about them. I talked about the 3 little pigs earlier. I'm reminded of 3 little pigs because the 3 little pigs, they had plans. If you remember the story of the 3 little pigs, what did the 3 little pigs plan to do? What did they do in the story?
Building the house?
Yeah. Then some unplanned fire or storm came around. What was it?
Yeah, he blew it down.
Exactly. But he blew it down, but it was only able to blow it down because of the way that it was what?
Built.
The way it was built. That's what I'm trying to get you to see.
Yeah, you taking us way back.
I know. I'm taking you way back. That's why I gave you time to kind of remember it, to try to bring it forward earlier. I want to give you a warning. But they built houses, and they built their house based off of what they thought was best. But when a problem came along, when a trial came along, when a tribulation came along, and that came along in the form of the wolf, he huffed and he puffed and he blew it down. All except for the last ones. But that was a problem, trial, or tribulation that the pigs faced. It was a storm of trouble. Why was it a storm of trouble? Remember, we define the word storm. One of the definitions of the word storm is a violent assault on a defending position. What was the 3 little pigs' defending position? What was the defending position?
Their house.
Their house, exactly. Was there a violent assault by the wolf on their house?
Yes.
Okay, so it was a violent assault. It was a storm. The wolf brought a storm. And that violent assault blew the house down, all except for one house, okay? There were other stories like this, though, where fires or storms try the foundation that you've built. But this case, these fires and storms that I'm referring to now, have to do with what you have learned in God, what you've applied from your teachings that you've received. Let me give you some examples of this. I'm reminded of Moses and Pharaoh. How that Pharaoh, like a storm, did things to try Moses. And Moses had to choose to have faith in God or not. Because that was the only way he was going to be able to get those people out of Egypt. He couldn't do it himself. But did not Moses have some problems that were put in front of him by Pharaoh? Did not Moses have a violent assault on his defending position, which was let my people go? So that was the foundation. Moses had a belief in God that he built his life around at that point. And the Lord proved himself by fighting for Moses. Actually, it was like this next one, which is the children of Israel and their enemies. Their enemies had many times had a violent assault on the children of Israel. One of them happened to be the Philistines, one of those enemies. And that enemy had a champion soldier whose name was Goliath. And Goliath had a violent assault on David. Now, David could have chose to accept the common wisdom of the king and of most of the people that were in the army. And what was their common wisdom about Goliath? Anybody? Bible scholars? What was the king and the people in the children of Israel's army? What was their common belief, their common faith when it came to Goliath?
That they were giants, they were bigger than them, and they couldn't be successful in getting rid of them.
Okay, but are these not the people who were brought out of Egypt by God?
Yeah.
Were these not the descendants of Abraham, Moses? Were these not people whom they had seen God work in the miracles in their life, who had given them a king? Were these not people who were following the law of God? So you mean to tell me that they had more faith, even the king, they had more faith to believe that Goliath could not be beaten at all than they had in the fact that God could make a way out of no way? You tell me that's the way it was? Apparently it was. I'm trying to get you to see that people's foundation being tried is not new. David's foundation was being tried. What David had faith in was different than what King Saul had, or what the children of Israel, the people in the armies of the children of Israel had. They thought David was crazy. They thought he had lost his mind. That's how serious it was for him to think that he could go out and defeat Goliath. But whose foundation was David depending upon? Whose foundation was he having faith in? And whose foundation did, when he spoke, it sound like he had faith in it? Whose?
You saying who did David have faith in?
Yes. Who's found from David's words? Who did it sound like that David had faith in?
In God.
So the foundation that David had built, we were talking about people building on their foundation. because we all have to build our foundation. That's why the Bible said, as newborn babies desire the sincere milk of the word of God to grow, which means you're building a foundation. You're building a temple. You're building a house. And David built his house by believing and trusting and having faith in God. Well, obviously Pharaoh and the children of Israel, who the members of the army, didn't have that much faith in God because they believed that God could only do things up until the point of them seeing their enemy, like Goliath. And at that point, they had more faith in what their enemies could do to them than what God could do for them. I want you to get this because this is the same challenge that God's people have today. The children of Israel got in the midst of that war. They got in the midst of getting ready to fight the Philistines, and they lost faith in God. The Philistines were marching toward them, and they lost faith in God. The army lost faith in God. The king lost faith in God. David did not lose faith in God. So in the midst of the storm, the king and the children of Israel, the members of the army, were not standing on their faith in God. They had more faith in their foundation they had built, had more faith in man than it did God. And this happened in many different instances with the children of Israel and their enemies. Another example is Job and his setbacks. We'll call them that. Job and his setbacks. Job's foundation before his setbacks suggested that he did what? Did it suggest that he had faith in God before he suffered his setbacks?
Yes, yes.
So although he was rich and he had a good quality of life, his family's life was good, he still had strong faith in God, demonstrated faith in God. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. After his setbacks occurred, after he lost his riches, was stolen, and his children killed, and some of his employees were killed, after he lost his riches, how was his faith toward God in the midst of that storm? Because that's a whirlwind. That's like a again, unplanned. All is unplanned, and it's just happening in his life. How was he in the midst of that storm of trouble? Problems coming from every direction. How was he in the midst of that? Did he give up on God?
No.
Was it easy?
No.
No, it wasn't easy. But he didn't give up on God. He continued to show his trust in God. Oh, praise be to God, from whom all blessings flow. It is our prayer at Clay Family Ministries that your life has been increased with the increase of God through this study. We appreciate and are thankful for your fellowship during this life skills study segment.